difference is we have we have Chantel and our
Right
all
there's
right.
what I have. Right there's
What is
what
I can't see. You got to read it to me, Billy. You're gonna have to read. It's a competition now, buddy. It's
I.
right
Okay.
now, folks. You're just tuning in. Billy is got his Wi-Fi bandwidth pulled up. I got mine, and my test is running right now.
I got 342 download and 25.8 upload.
Mm. My Google is now connecting to Chantel, Rocky Mount, Virginia. So I feel like I'm dialing in, Billy. Get ready.
All right.
If you see a drop in your bandwidth, it's because I'm connecting in there, and I'm going. Uh,
Oh, you gonna
I'm
steal my
still,
stuff?
stealing some of your signal. Hang on here. I'm almost done. All right, so I'm 112 down. What was yours? 26, 27,
No, down is 342. Up,
342 down.
yep. Download 342 Mbps. Upload 25.8 Mbps.
I am 99, Billy. I am on. I'm sitting here
Can you
bragging
see?
about how
Can you
good my
see? Can
service
you see
is.
that? Can you see that?
Nah, heck, I couldn't see it if you standing next to me. No, it's a little blurry on the screen. It,
Okay.
it Now here's what I will tell you. That's on my Wi-Fi. Are you hardlined in, Billy?
No, that's on Wi-Fi.
If you Cat 5 or if you go hardline in, then you're going to get that true whatever that high speed. So your speed would actually pick up if you would just connect into your router.
Okay.
Um, my upstairs laptop is hard. I have it hardwired into a docking station,
Right.
and just for that reason that they did educate me on that. They're like, look, your Wi-Fi is going to be intermediate. It's going to be dependent on your device. It's going to be dependent on your Wi-Fi card and your the age of your device, all that cool stuff. That I was like, oh, that kind of made sense. And then, but he was like, if you hardwire in, you're going to get close to the well. So
So where I was going with this before we came on live was that I got some friends that, and I know you'll know what this area is. They moved about, if you know where the old Camel Stowe is there at Truvine and Sontag Road, they moved about 3 or 4 miles past there. And, they got Starlink. And I was down there a couple of weeks ago and that's the first experience I had with Starlink, but it was really, really good. And I mean, they're out in the middle of, you know, you barely get, you get no cell phone service. Uh,
yeah.
but with the internet with Starlink, they were really impressed, and that comes in different packages you can get, and so I don't know.
You
We're
run,
happy right now.
do you run a home phone still?
No,
Yeah,
no,
same. Yeah, we don't. Um, that's another business item that comes up sometimes about that business phone. Yeah, I think dealerships are still required to have a line, like a
okay,
hard line in, or there's some couple things on business side. But when I went into fitness, and I had we had one, two, let's say we had 5 locations or 6 locations. We had an admin at each location, and we had different number on the door, and we had hardline phones in all those locations. And man, one of the first things I was like, why do we have this many admins? Um, because it wasn't generating enough work. So we basically what we ended up doing was we moved into a cell phone. I forwarded all the numbers that we had into our main number, and then we were able to streamline our customer service and because we didn't. Here's the other thing: we didn't generate a lot of phone calls. Um, and if you did, it was brief. So that became in a lot of industries a hardline phone is just an unnecessary expense. They'll try to sell it with you with your internet package or whatever, but ultimately um, it restricts you when and so as it moved around and different things. But as I was owning my gym, I had all of my I had the hard line. It was still there as part of the internet package, but I had that number forwarded to a Sideline number. Sideline's an app you can download. The simple plan's $10 a month. So thinking about yourself, just to give you in our the business side of our conversation tonight is Sideline. Google Voice works well, but Sideline. The cool thing about Sideline, I liked it a little bit better. It was more the app. It was still um, it was a little better user experience than what Google Voice was originally. But either one of those, Google Voice is free, Billy.
Right.
It's an app you can download down on your phone. It's Google Voice is free. You set up that phone number for that device, and then when you publish like your business number, you can hand that number out versus your cell. It's still
So
going to ring in on your device.
so they would dial that number, but it would still ring into your
Yep.
cell. I'm
Yep.
gonna look into that, because that's So we got rid of a hard line several years ago, and the only calls we ever got on it was spam calls,
Yep.
and the reason we kept it was at that time we were running a fax machine fairly often. I mean, I would say daily, and then as things moved away from fax, plus we got a copier now that can do fax, and got that hooked into our modem and internet and stuff like that. So we're pretty set there.
All right, so I want to close out Google Voice for you in Sideline, and then I want to ask you a question. Um, that one of the other things to keep in mind for the business aspect, and this is a flow that I set up inside of our business. Most of what I found in just working with my clients and customers, even at the dealership, Billy, is that first interaction. Some people just don't want to talk to you. They don't. It's just we can text now. You're used to texting. What do we do today? I didn't pick the phone up and call you until we had news, right? I was like, hey, this is a voice call. Um, but I texted you. I didn't. So it's you can get to it when you need to. You don't have to stop what you're doing to interrupt your day and all that stuff. So that's the other cool part about Google Voice and Sideline versus a hard line is you can text from it. You can text from it, store numbers inside of it, and all those things. Set up individual voicemails. So when that rings, be like, "Hey, thank you for calling Billy at Ferguson Safety Solutions. You can email me today at william.ferguson@fergusonsafetysolution.com." Make sure you write that down, folks. But anyway, you can set up your own voicemail and all that stuff. So I wanted to beat that in the ground for you. So that's two tools, folks. Make sure if you're in business or look, if you just want another line that you can give out to the in-laws, that's a really easy way to do it. And be mindful of that if you're going into a brick and mortar space is you don't want to be restricted to a cord on a wall. And this technology allows you to be more mobile. Um, so here's what I was going to ask you. What are you faxing? Like who's still there's only DMV is the only agency I know that told me recently, hey, fax that to me. I'm like, well, you lost your mind.
We used to fax a lot of stuff with the school system
Mm.
back and forth. Uh, when we had some projects going on with the school system, we would fax it into their administration office. Uh,
Most people I encounter, Billy, have never seen one.
oh yeah, I
We,
get it.
we had one downtown at the SBDC office. I called I can't remember in Franklin County. I called a couple of places and just said, "Hey, you got your send me a fax." I said, "Right. Hey, this is how a fax works on a piece of paper." And I said, "Fax it to this number." And the lady's like, "Jeff, I don't know what you're talking about." And I was like, "I'm serious," because here I was going video that paper coming through, right? And you get all the connection stuff. I was just going to shoot a video for social media or whatever of that fax machine working. They didn't have no clue what I was talking about.
So I can't speak for today, but I left employment with the county on April the 1st of 2024. And at that time, we were required to uh, have all dog bites or animal bites reported to us. And those went in, if just say you went into Roanoke Memorial for an animal bite, and that bite occurred in Franklin County or any county, it could have been Botetourt or anywhere, they were required by, I don't know if it was state code or ordinance, they were required to fax that in. They couldn't email it in. It had to come by fax. So that was at my place of employment. That is the only thing we ever got by fax. But it was a requirement that it had to come by fax.
The only thing that I ever remember that was very drew out in law enforcement was there was a big rule on criminal histories. On if we like when I was in the 911 center is I couldn't I had to disseminate that in a very particular way. Like it was for your eyes only. It was as close to the classified world as one could get in a local area, but it was something that we like we had you lose your job over um, screwing this up, and you couldn't like we weren't allowed to mail them. I know the state does in some cases and different things, but I couldn't transmit the information electronically or anything like that. I could send it over the radio unencrypted if it was an emergency, and I had to justify that emergency. I had to be able. I could do it like that, but I had to be able to justify that emergency should I be called in on the thing there. Like it was something you had to heavily document.
So
But I could fax it, Billy, as long as the intended recipient was standing or staffing the receiving fax machine. So like if I remember one time I think it was Joel was there was in a court case and I was running some criminal histories for them to update some just information as recent, and he was sitting beside the fax machine. I would run it, he'd give me the information, I'd run it, and then I would fax that to him, and he'd be like, "Yep, I'd hear it ring and all this stuff." That's so that was one of the biggest. That's really the only thing that we used fax machines for.
so we got caught up with the catch-22. You mentioned something about the criminal histories. To be a volunteer EMS provider in Virginia, you're required to run a criminal history check. Now, this has changed a little bit now. It's still required, but the state office of the EMS will run a fingerprint check for you. But prior to several years ago, we would run a criminal check on anybody that wanted to volunteer. And it's like you said, it was for your eyes only, and it was supposed to be destroyed after you did it. But then when you read the rules and regulations for the EMS, it said that anytime you got inspected, which was once every 2 years, that you had to maintain a criminal history on all your providers, and the inspector could ask to see that criminal history. Never had that happen in all my
Yeah,
years, but it was there. So we kind of got caught up in a little quandary there with and it was actually a discussion with state police one day because we were looking at trying to get a where we had our own I can't recall, was it OSI number, OSC number, or something like that. It was called.
yeah,
There's a number you
yeah.
have to have some
Oh, yeah.
be able to
OSC,
run that.
yeah.
So we had that number, and we were looking at getting our own terminal, VSIN terminal at our office. And when they came and inspected our office, and you know, one thing led to another, we got talking, and they're like, "Well, why are you keeping these criminal histories?" And we said, "Well, it says here we got to do it." So, you know, we kind of got to slide by, but it was very controlled that only a couple, you know, I was a director, but I could never see the criminal history because I wasn't law enforcement certified. So somebody in the fire marshal's office that was law enforcement certified would run the criminal history, and then they would give me a letter saying either this person meets the requirement or doesn't meet the requirement. And I would sign that letter and send it out, and then the criminal histories would be locked up under lock and key that only the law enforcement side had. So I never saw the criminal history. Jeff Robertson called. I just sent him a letter saying you do not meet the qualifications. And, you know, if you want to find out what it is, then you go run your own criminal history. But by Office of EMS, you do not meet the qualifications. So, you know, yeah, there's a big there's a big lot of requirements and strict guidance on that right there. So
Yeah, I'm dated on a lot of that. You're just getting my brain working. Ours was under lock and key, and I think there's a time when all that dated. If there was an outstanding warrant, I think we ran a current one on a regular basis. There's some rules that applied to that, but we didn't follow a lot of those criminal histories unless they were relevant to something pending or what have you. Those got shredded. And you just ran a fresh one when you needed it. Um, it's a there's a lot of just not bad red tape, but there's a lot of rules that go around how you handle that stuff. So here's what I was going I was going to tell you too. You're talking about business. I was um, one of the hot button issues, and this affects your area. I'm from Roanoke, but this affects you because you're a Roanoke patron. Is there's a lot of buzz about the meals tax,
Absolutely.
proposed meals tax increases that are going down. So that's kind of the goings on into kind of between our areas here is just there's a budget shortfall and um, I'm most of those owners are some kind of association to coaching or kids are the same age or whatever. So I'm following it a little closer just because they're my friends and I'm a business advisor and I'm a business coach and so I'm following it really closely to see how all that shakes out because it kind of they felt like you know the answer to this budget shortfall was an immediate taxation of restaurants. So there's a couple of videos I've seen where they did some Facebook reels where there's those they've gotten together, and then there's a petition that I had saw today where they just trying to get as many get some signatures just to say, hey, this is not the way to go about it. We think you should look at some different ways. So my question to you, and you've worked in that in government for a long time, I've heard a couple different numbers, and the initial number maybe is like a $4 million shortfall, or maybe 9 million. And sometimes where I think, and this is why I'm asking because the Jeff Robertson way, or someone comes along is like, yeah, we don't do it like it for this reason. But it's like in business, sometimes we transmit that transparency, like, "Hey, team, we're about to work on Saturdays because we're behind," or hey, team, we're going to have to shut down on Saturdays because we're our work is down," and we make those adjustments as we go. But um, how does that work in county when you end up with this sudden? In my world, you should know pretty quick. Hey, we got a $4 million is a lot of money and I look at it and I try to make it relevant, like in my small business world and all these other things. Like I'm on my numbers constantly, and I'm on my clients' numbers and working with them on understanding their numbers, and then we know where we're at by the day. We check our numbers every day to make sure that everything's flowing in, especially if you got money coming in and going out. You're making sure there's no bottlenecks with that. If you're either got somebody doing it, you're doing it yourself. So my question to you was how does that work in on the government side, and why would that be such a what the heck? We didn't see that coming. Or you just kind of if you can help me, if you don't know, that's cool too.
Well, I think I don't know if I can answer that question 100%, but I think some of it has to do with you have a lot of taxes that come in to a local government. You know, you have personal property, you have real estate, you have machinery, you have tools. You know, there's a lot of taxes that can be put on a citizen. And I'll go back to one thing we talked about a while back in with a Dillon rule state. There's a
Yeah.
couple of different kinds of states, and a Dillon rule state, which Virginia is, you can only put a tax on whatever the General Assembly allows you to put it on. A home rule state, such as North Carolina, can tax anything that's not prohibited by the General Assembly. So, with that being said, uh, I don't know, 20, 30 years ago, counties were allowed to implement meals taxes. The big hot one now is tobacco taxes that's coming out.
Yeah.
So counties and towns and cities use that as a revenue stream. And in a city is a separate jurisdiction, but a town is not. A town is part of the county. So I use you for an example because Roanoke County has both. The city of Roanoke is an independent jurisdiction, but the town of Vinton is part of Roanoke County. Uh, so basically, if you live in the town of Vinton, you're double taxed. Well, Franklin County is I don't want to say they didn't have a budget shortfall, but they needed about $1.7 million to balance the budget. Now, we'll say that good government rule is that you always have at least 10% of your budget in a contingency fund. So the Franklin County budget is about $220 million. Well, Franklin County is a good municipal rule. It's got about $22 million in a contingency fund. The problem there is that I have, Jeff, is you're basically required or highly encouraged to maintain that level of finances because it helps with your bond ratings. Counties don't have astronomical amounts of money. When I would dare say that Roanoke City, I heard today, is getting ready to build a new fire station. Well, they'll probably sell bonds or go to a financial institution and borrow money to build that station with. It's just the way it works. Well, in Franklin County, we needed $1.7 million. So 1 penny of real estate tax in Franklin County will generate about $1 million on 1 cent. Well, that's what the county administrator came back and recommended was a 1 cent tax increase. But then the board asked for a 2 cent tax increase because they wanted to build up a capital fund to replace some capital needs and create a revenue stream for certain things. Not saying that's a bad idea. The problem I had with that, Jeff, is go back to that $22 million. I can remember about, I don't know, probably 15 years ago or maybe 20 years ago that, remember, you're required to keep that 20 million or 10% of your budget. Well, Franklin County had about 7 million above that. And it's a bad idea. And I'm not a financial advisor, but I've sat in a lot of meetings, and you don't, those are one-time monies. It's kind of like what you got in your savings account right now. If you need that for an emergency, a heat pump goes out, you can pull and go do that. But if you're using that to pay the electric bill every month, you've probably got some financial issues that some people need to talk about. So you don't really use that money for salaries and the like. Now here's what that I've never understood. So tune up your hearing aid here. So about 20 years ago, Franklin County had $7 million above the required minimums. Well, now Franklin County has somewhere between 80 and 83 million above the required minimums.
Hang on. How much you say?
Between 80 and 83 million above. So there's 83 or 80. I heard yesterday it was 83. Previously, I had understood it was 80 million. So this is setting in a contingency fund. And my question with that is there's a couple areas. One, where do we start spending that money?
Yeah.
When it was 7 million, we talked about, well, let's save it in case, we need to build a fire station or something like that happens. But where's the demarcation line at, all right, are we going to start spending it when we get to 100 million? Or we got to get to 200 million, and we got to get to $1 billion. Where do we start spending it at? So my thing is why didn't we take that, if we needed $5 million out of that money to bring our capital where it needs, why didn't we spend that $5 million out of that contingency fund, not raise the taxes? And within a couple of years, that money would have been built back on the interest. Now, the tax increase did fail on a 5-2 vote. And what they did was to balance the budget was one thing happened this year that I've only seen happen a couple of times in my 33 years of employment was the Franklin County insurance for the employees actually went down for a little over 4%.
Really?
So a little over 4% saved $1 million. So now we're down to 750,000 shortfall. Well, the agreement was to take $750,000 out of that contingency fund, show up the capital side with it. And then when the pipeline tax comes through, there's actually a pipeline tax that'll generate a couple $1 million, and to replace that $750,000 back with that. But to answer to go on with your tax question, not only do you have meals tax that in Franklin County, let's face it, it probably generates $500,000-$600,000 because most of the restaurants in Franklin County are located within the town of Rocky Mount. Well, the town of Rocky Mount has its own meals tax, which is 6%. The county is 4%. But then in addition to that, you have a lodging tax. Do you ever go to a hotel and you look on the internet and it says the room is $145, so when you go pay the room, it's $167. Well, you paid a lodging fee. Depending on where it's located at, you paid a tourism fee. Go to Virginia Beach and rent a hotel room, you pay a tourism fee. Yep. And then a lot of times you have a parking fee you pay in that. Sales tax. Sales tax comes, a percentage of that comes back to the locality where the sale is made at. And you've heard me say this before with no derogatory comments about Roanoke, but I don't like when people go to Roanoke to buy something that has been purchased in Franklin County. Because if you purchased in Roanoke, that tax goes to support Roanoke. If you purchased in Franklin County, it goes to support Franklin County. And I know there's times you've got to go to Roanoke to get stuff that's not available in Franklin County. So now one thing that's a little bit screwy with sales tax and lodging tax, those are collected by the state. It takes about 2 months for them to roll back to the locality. So if you're looking at fees today, the sales tax and lodge taxes that are coming in today, those are actually taxes that were generated back in February. And then there's other kind of taxes you can put on to do that. But it's not like a business. And as I'm getting more and more into the business, and you're my mentor on that, Jeff. And, if you went down to your business and you see that I'm not meeting budget, well, you may could raise the prices a little bit, but after a while that started affecting your bottom line by the people that's coming in. So probably what you did was you started cutting services or cutting employment. And that's something that's very, very rare for a locality to do, is cut services. But I think there is sometimes that some services can be cut a little bit. And
do you see sometimes, Billy, that you can cut some positions and not interrupt services just because you're heavy in one area, or there's better technology that can service, right? No different than me eliminating that phone bill inside of my business. Is there things that the government works to eliminate so they can trim down, or they can stay lean or not grow, or is that a thing?
Oh, I think absolutely. I think that Franklin County probably does a good job leveraging technology, but they're probably only leveraging it for 60% of what they could do 100%. For example, you can't pay your taxes online. You've got to go in and see a person. You can pay them with a credit card or a debit card, but you can't go online and pay.
Why? No, I was thinking the reason why was because I didn't want to pay the credit card fee. Is that a?
Well, as my understanding, when you're doing it online, there's some kind of special receiving network. I think it's called PIC or PCI something.
PCI compliance. Yep. But there's services that come alongside there. Here's what I say sometimes with that to kind of speak to that is there's two sides to the coin. You that's an investment into that platform or software, but I think what you'll see is they probably got some good data on how their collections go up because of convenience.
Well, yeah, and yeah, granted, I agree, and I'll take it a little bit further with in the EMS world in which I worked in. We bill for EMS services, but you couldn't use a credit card. Right. You either had to. Now we could give you an 800 number for who we outsourced it to in Kentucky, and you could pay it there with a credit card. But if you come to our office and wanted to pay it, it had to be cash or check.
Why couldn't you just do tap to pay, move on because of the credit card process and stuff? Or
we didn't even have a way inside our office to accept credit cards.
Bill, I could have helped you with that, buddy.
There was no way in there to accept a credit card. And I'm speaking for Franklin County government now. So I think there is ways to leverage technology to maybe save some money. Now, I think the other side of that is, Jeff, is that I think you got to look at the demographic that you're serving. Franklin County is traditionally a retirement community, and you have older folks moving in, uh, and some people, men, you don't think nothing about jumping on here and doing this electronically. Well,
Yeah. Yeah,
I
you're
tried
right.
to go to one of my neighbors; they have no idea that what we're doing. So I think at getting people to utilize that technology, that may cause some issues there
We
also.
I teach business owners that, Billy, and I always have there's always a plan for that person. Like, we're not going, like, if I say scan a QR code, you look at me like you got two heads. I'm like, give me your phone, and I'll do it for you. And then sometimes they hand me a flip phone. I'm like, all right, hold on, what's your address? We'll mail you some. Right?
Well,
You just meet your customer where they are, type thing. You're right. I understand what you're saying.
it took me forever to get it with some of our departments about and you kind of segued into it was QR codes.
Yeah.
We had it. If you go in and you need a box of Band-Aids for an ambulance, you picked that box of Band-Aids up, you took a sheet, you wrote one box of Band-Aids large, you laid it in a folder over here. Somebody else went through that folder, wrote the price down of those Band-Aids and reordered them. Well, hey guys, we got a QR code reader on our phone. We can print our own QR codes. Why don't we print it, put some adhesive on it, and stick it in there? Now you get that box of Band-Aids, you swipe it to your phone, yep. It comes into a central database and we can move on. But just getting people to that point, because it was out of their comfort zone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a lot. You got to have. Anytime you introduce change in technology, listen, dude. That's a big deal. I've when we went from paper to computer at the dealership, and that was a lift. That was a solid year and a half implementation. I did product research. There was some high level stuff that I really liked, but I knew that the dealership wouldn't be able to. So people ask me today, like, "Why'd you buy this? This thing's middle of the road. It's kind of mid." And I'm like, "Yeah, but everybody there can use it." And they were like, "Oh, hold on, now you got something here." So, but I taught myself how to use the platform after we decided on it and worked with their people and kind of got an idea for about 3 months. I had to label bays so we could keep up with inventory and stuff. And it was, I rolled out the rest of the team's implementation right when we kind of call our quiet season, which is not really quiet, but that's a big deal. That's an undertaking sometimes just to get people to move into that direction.
And back to the initial question, I think there is ways to cut some cost there, where maybe where we've got 6 people doing something, we can do it with 7 people. Um, you know, Here in Franklin County, uh, we've got, and I'll give you an example here, Jeff. The department I used to work for, we had 2 fire marshals, and they're getting ready to hire a third. Well, there's only 8 localities this side of Lynchburg that have fire marshals. You're not even required to have fire marshal.
Yeah.
So is those positions, or is there a benefit to that? I think there is a benefit to having your own fire marshal. I'm not sure there's a benefit to having 3 out there. You know, I don't know how many Roanoke City and Roanoke County has, but I'll dare say it's probably about 5, maybe each. Uh, and I think that 3 is a little overboard. So right there is some cost to cut. So I think in any budget there is some there's some fat that can be trimmed out of that. If you just going through it and meeting the minimums, you could get by a lot cheap. But again, I'm also a proponent on, and I know it seems like I'm running in circles here, but I'm a proponent on everything a locality does, or even a business, is customer driven.
Yep.
If you had your gym set up and you had 3 treadmills and you had 4 sets of free weights, but you had a mile long line waiting for the free weights and you only had 2 treadmills running,
Yep.
after a while, you're going to get rid of some of them treadmills, get some more free weights. Yeah. Well, the customer drove that. And I think it's the same thing here. If the customer, and I'm talking about, when I say customer and the government, I'm talking about the citizen, if they want, you know, more garbage trucks, and they want the garbage picked up 2 times a week versus 1 time a week, Well, if enough of those citizens make their voice heard, you're going to get garbage picked up 2 times a week.
Yep.
And I think that's a lot of times that what governing bodies, they get into looking at what my neighbor has and comparing that. And, and it's not needed. Do we need everything that Roanoke City has in Franklin County? Probably not. But we have basic fundamentals that we need. Now, does Craig County need everything Franklin County has? Probably not.
Yeah.
So I think you got to look at, you got to look at your population, you got to look at your finances, but you've also got to look at, what the citizen wants. If the citizen is happy with not having any garbage service, why should a governing board care whether you get it or not? Because if the citizen's not complaining about it, I think that that's one thing that can be cut. And I can give you an example where that had. We used to have the green boxes in Franklin County where everybody would drop. There were 70 some of these sites where everybody would go dump the trash. Now, did they look messy? Absolutely. Were they an eyesore? Absolutely. But people had come accustomed to that. So a couple of years ago, just because everybody else did it, we did away with the dumpster sites where there were 70 some of those dumpster sites and put in compactor sites that now there's only about 7 or 8 of them, maybe 10 in the whole county. Well, now I've got mine that I go to, but if I can't get to that one for whatever reason, the next one is 8-10 miles away. So I hear a lot of complaints on that, and that's an inconvenience. Where I think the way to have went there and even been cheaper is to better enforce your dumpster laws, whether that meant manning the sites, whether that meant hiring compliance officers that rode around and looked at sites. I don't think there was nothing, there was no teeth in, there was a sign that says you can't dump your trash here if you're not from wherever, or you can't dump it on the ground, but nobody ever enforced that.
Yeah.
Now it's pretty when I go to my dumpster. It's gated in, it's got lights, it's got a guy sits out there, but it also locks up every night at 6 o'clock. So if I want to take my trash at 7 o'clock, I can't take it. Some of them are locked on weekends where you can't go. So I think that was a trade-off where that a service that the citizens wanted, or a majority of the citizens wanted, was taken away.
I remember this, Billy. It's interesting that went to a staff position. That's in a world where we do where we do QR codes and scanning IDs and unique key codes and you get what I'm saying. Like it's crazy that someone staffs there to make sure you don't throw your trash on the ground. Or I get that, that's part of it, but also making sure you know how to use the equipment and don't get hurt and all. I understand that too. So pros and cons to it. I want to ask you something real quick before I forget. All right, so here's a question because this comes up sometimes with me. The county has $83 million, and we were going to say 83. Maybe this is April. Where are we at, Billy? Just so in case we're dating, April 17th, 2025. Just in case it comes up. So we're going somewhere around there. 83 million is what we're going to use as a figure. Based on just today's climate at 5% interest, that generates around $4 million. Is there anything that allows, hey, this is our interest on our money, our fund has grown, we're good here, we got plenty of safety net, all these things, the 4 million we can use in these areas, or we can fund this program off the interest of our money, or we can short term for, is that something local governments can do, or is that a big no-no?
Oh, absolutely. As long the only real no-no to that is using that money for recurring expenses.
Got it.
So if we needed 2 new school buses, that's a perfect use for that money.
Got it.
What would not be a perfect use is to hire the bus driver that drives the bus. Because once you pay that expense one time, that's good. But if it's recurring, that's a bad use. Any financial advisor will tell you that's a bad use.
Yeah.
But to me, that's where, you can use your capital. That's where you could buy your police cars, buy your garbage trucks, buy your, put in your sewer lines, buy your fire trucks. The So I think that's good use for that. Plus, that money is going to come back through some taxes. And is there again? I guess my real stickler for that is, where does that stop? I mean, I think I'd be more happy if you come in and said, "All right, we'll get to 100 million. Everything after we get over 100 million, we're going to
Yeah,
spend."
yeah,
But nobody's told me that.
yeah.
You know,
There's not. That's why I was wondering why it went from 7 to 83.
well, it just because it just kept acute, like you
Yeah,
said.
right. Yeah, like
April 17th next year, we're going to sit here and say now there's
yeah.
87 million or whatever it is in there. Where does that stop? And I think if somebody could tell us that, and you're looking at one account now, there's other accounts out there. Franklin County has what they call a capital account that has $1 million in it. They have a budget stabilization fund that had $1 million in it. Now they pulled some of that out the other day, but there's these different accounts out there, and I'm not picking on Franklin County. All counties, I'm sure.
Everybody, this is no
You
one's
know,
immune to this conversation.
there's certain amounts of money that's set over there for tourism.
Yeah.
That
Billy, here's and to speak to what you just said. I want this is our opportunity because you're educating me because some of the stuff I know, some of it I don't know. But this is where I think our government sometimes does a bad job of controlling their narrative. Like, just I don't understand. Like sometimes you just like we talk about with reporting or whatever. I know there's a reason or whatever that might be, and we're not going to make everybody. But transparency, I think, but just an understanding of how this money gets here, things. Um, does you the other thing I was going to ask you, counties, towns. So Roanoke City, you got all the taxes you mentioned. That most of your counties and localities have that. Is there any other alternate incomes that they have outside of taxation? The example I had was recycling. Do they get money back from recycling efforts? And we went here, we separate our recycling and all those things, but I've never really seen like, oh, this is how much money we generated because we pay for that recycling. We pay, not only do we pay it, in my world, that program should be self-sufficient because it's a money maker.
Well, recycling is a tricky thing, Jeff.
Yeah.
Recycling, in my opinion, in today's environment, um, sometimes a large portion of times gives communities a nice, warm, fuzzy feeling. And I'll give you an example with Bedford County. If you go to Bedford County, uh, they have boxes set up here's cardboard, here's plastic, here's glass. But and the truth is, the only thing they're recycling out of there is cardboard.
Yeah.
So what they do with the glass and plastic is you separate it. They're contracted with a hauler that comes in, and they pay that hauler, and then that hauler just takes it somewhere to an out of state or out of jurisdiction landfill and sells it, and it goes in a landfill there. So it's just what pocket you're taking the money out, but it gives those citizens a warm, fuzzy feeling. Now, 5, 6 years ago, it wasn't like that, Jeff, because a lot of your glass and plastics went to either China or Indonesia, and they have quit accepting that. That is the problem that you don't see a lot of. You used to see these boxes like the old Goodwill boxes. Put your trash here, put your paper. You don't see those anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's because there's not a market to purchase that stuff.
There was a jurisdiction
market, it costs more money to do that than it did just to take it to the landfill.
There's a jurisdiction in Florida. I'm pretty sure it came out of Florida. I saw an article. That's what got me thinking about it. And I'm always kind of curious about different things. But they're like a couple of people got together and they just went and talked to things, and they kind of come out and said all this extra recycling that we're paying for, they end up canning their recycling because the citizens are paying for something that was ultimately going in with the trash, and so they eliminated the program and quit charging for recycling and just went back to the way they used to do it for that exact reason. I'm not saying that's here or whatever, but I know that locality down there, the people were like, wait a minute, we thought we were paying to have these items separated and recycled, and we're not. Well, let's don't do it no more. So they canned their whole program
But
for that reason.
I think you're seeing that a lot of places, and I think and again, I can't speak for Roanoke, but that's the closest urban area I got. But recently, a couple years ago, Roanoke City put a 5-cent tax on plastic bags.
Yeah.
So if you go in a store that gets it, well, I see just as many plastic bags as I ever did. I don't think that meant what it done. That put in a little more revenue for Roanoke City that they can use to do whatever that they determine needs to be done. But the objective was to cut down on the use of plastic bags, and I don't think it done that. I
You
think
said something. You said something earlier, and you look. You were adding them up. All right, so we're gonna go on vacation. We're gonna use our paycheck that was taxed. Right? I've used this example before in some conversations and some of my teaching. I will take my paycheck that was taxed to put gas in my car that was taxed, to ride in the car that is taxed, tags, inspection, all those things on the tires that I was taxed to put on it for retail, and I'm gonna go to my vacation. I'm gonna pay a lodging tax. I'm gonna pay meals tax. I'm gonna pay, right? So I was explaining to someone, I'm like, this is why this gets to be a bigger deal nowadays, because if you run the numbers, you're 50%. You know, there's a vast majority of your income that actually goes into taxes. Just by the time you get to where you're going. Maybe not that much. You know, I've never got deep in the weeds, but I just know like, um, so when folks say, you know what, this meals tax, man, this ain't the coolest thing, because the grand scheme of things, we pay into a lot of taxes in what we do every day.
we do, and it seems like that once we get whatever the hot tax is, I think meals tax now, everywhere wants to raise the meals tax.
Yeah.
Is that fair to the restaurants? Because all the restaurants is going to do is add it on to the price of the commodity that you're purchasing. Now, instead of a Big Mac costing $1, it's going to cost $1.06,
Yep.
and pass it along to the consumer. I think the same thing happens with the minimum wage. I get it from a governmental standpoint of let's increase the minimum wage, but did that really meet the outcome that you wanted? Because if I've got to pay an employee $15 an hour or $20 an hour, whatever it may be, I'm just going to raise the prices it's costing. That's what brings in a lot of these automatic checkouts at
Yeah.
places, because I can pay one time expense, put that automatic checkout, and have one person standing there watching 10 registers. Well, now you had 10 people that were making $12 an hour. Now we've only got one person watching these is making $15 an hour.
Yeah.
So all that stuff has a catch-22 in it, but I think there's avenues out there. I guess I would be a proponent more of I won't say a sin tax or luxury tax. I mean, if I
Shoot, Billy, we'd be broke for the syntax. I'm just
yeah, we'd
kidding.
be broke, wouldn't we? But I think that the word I'm looking at, okay, if I can go ahead and buy a $400,000 motorhome, I can probably afford to pay a little more taxes there. If I can go ahead and buy a Corvette, I can probably afford to pay a little more taxes there. Where everybody's got to eat.
Yeah.
Everybody has property or real estate. Everybody has to have a car or whatever. So I think sometimes that we get on and I was having this conversation with somebody yesterday, as a matter of fact. I says, how come every time we want to raise taxes, and I'm speaking for Franklin County, two places y'all look is real estate and real estate or personal property, real estate or meals tax. What about, why can't we tax motorhomes? Why can't we tax bulldozers? Why can't we tax, do you know how many people live in Franklin County own planes? I mean, you probably never thought about that, but there's a lot of plane owners in Franklin County. Well, if you could afford that plane, you could probably afford a little tax increase on that. Um, and I think that sometimes we need to think out of the box and look at that stuff. I think the bag tax is not really a fair tax. I see what Roanoke's want to do, but who wants to go and bring out all that stuff? And you don't have, now maybe you can take your own bag.
Yeah, I mean, your retail.
You can take your own box or whatever. But I think for many years, and I think it's came off, Jeff, but a lot of people didn't read it. But if you use a cell phone, you paid a wireless tax.
Yep.
And that wireless
911
tax is what paid for the 911 centers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that came off a couple of years, but I think there's other alternatives to look at. I'm a big proponent, and I don't know, how familiar are you with the fair tax, with what they call the fair tax?
Tell me about it.
It's where everything is taxed at the same rate everywhere.
That's kind of like what Texas does. Like
You pay
Texas is not
23%. If you read the fair tax book, everything you buy has got 23% tax on it. Everybody pays the same, no matter where you're at in the country or whatever. So, I think that that's a more fair way of doing it. Right now, I don't really know what I'm paying from county to county or town to county or city to city. And we pick on, certain things. Like I said, everywhere it goes out to the meals tax. So I think that maybe we need to look at, and we're limited what we can do because of being a deal and rule state. But I think we could work with our legislatures and maybe get some of that stuff maybe changed. And we get so many of these unfunded mandates that come down on businesses. And I'll speak from a government standpoint now. The government, the Commonwealth of Virginia government, dictates how many social service workers you have to have in a locality.
Yeah.
But they don't dictate how to put them, where they put them. So they may call Franklin County tomorrow and say, all right, we're going to send you money to hire 3 social service workers. Well, now the county has to figure out where to put them, the brick and mortar, all the stuff that comes with that. So that's an unfunded mandate that the county has to come up with on how to have these people a workspace. I don't know, Jeff. I think that and I want to go back a little bit. I know I'm rambling a little bit, but I want to go back to something you said earlier when you said it, transparency. I think that most localities do a very poor job of explaining what you get for your tax money.
Yeah, that's kind
Now,
of interesting.
I can go on Franklin County or Roanoke County, or Henry County. I can go on the internet and I can pull up the fire department budget, or I can pull up the school budget. What does that really mean? You know, what when you tell me the fire department got $80 million or whatever it may be, what do I get for that $80 million? Let's break it down where, all right, you're getting 24-hour coverage at 4 people per engine, 5 per ladder. You're getting a 2-minute response time. You're getting, 2,000 feet of hose, and have the price and what that costs. I mean, how many people out here know that an SCBA for firemen cost almost $10,000?
That's exactly it. Yeah.
How many people know that a power load system it hauls a stretcher in an ambulance is almost $50,000? People don't realize that fire truck today is selling for $1.2 million. And I think if we had it more broken down, drill down into that, would be better understanding. And I'll pick on my county. You can look under the public safety budget. So what does public safety mean to you? Well, Jeff, you're probably thinking it was fire and EMS, but the way the budget's written in Franklin County, that's fire, that's EMS, that's animal control, that's animal shelter, that's dispatchers, that's E911 center, that's Sheriff's Department Road, Sheriff's Department Corrections, and Sheriff's Department Jail, court services, the Commonwealth attorneys. All that was rolled into that public safety budget.
Right.
So when they look and you see that public safety got $14 million, well, it wasn't fire and EMS got $14 million. It was all that whole umbrella function got $14 million. But unless I lived in that world, I wouldn't know that.
Here's the other thing I want to point out to you, and we'll move on. We've absolutely beat that one to ground. But we're talking about percentages, folks, of just small amounts, and you're like, what's 1.7 or whatever. With that too, there's there's an immediate increase in credit card fees. So you as that consumer, when you go into the restaurant or whatever, that restaurant owner is not only, he's going to collect that tax, but his cost of operations goes up just through credit card fees as well. You're talking about, a few bucks or whatever, but it adds up over time. So those are the other implications. And I always kind of point out, like, the credit card industry, credit card fees, like, they never lose, man. Like they are if they raise taxes, good, we win. If we going up on everybody's salaries, we're going to do this, good. That's more debt, we win. And the credit card companies, if you go back through, I was thinking about that the other day during this. I was working on a conversation with some folks on on meals tax and just the implications and what that looks like, how we stack up into other areas and stuff. And we were all just kind of roundtabling, these different conversations, because I'm being educated as we go, just the same, like how all this works. And that came up, and I was like, well, you got to remember, it's going to increase your credit card fees. They're going to go up. So So then there's if you look at your business owner, there may be an adjustment of price on their menu. It may be small, but it may have to go up. So there's an increase that your client feels. So you said something earlier. Well, if I'm going to need to pay this employee whatever, I'm just going to raise my prices. Well, it gets to a point where people's not going to pay it.
Absolutely, Jeff.
That's the difference in government and private business is the government's going to make you pay that tax and they're going to put you in jail. There's consequences for not doing it or whatever. That business owners like I had to raise my prices. It got out to where people couldn't afford me, so they quit coming in. I have to close.
But I think you just made me think of a good point there too. But so if I'm charging 4 cents on the dollar for meals tax, and I'm bringing in X number of dollars, and now I raise that meals tax to 6 cents. Well, what if that 6 cents caused me to lose 100 customers in a month?
Yeah.
Did I really gain anything? Where let's keep it at 4% and do whatever we can to increase our sales. I think that's the key to it. And a lot of times the selling point is, well, it covers the people that are the tourists that are coming in. They're eating here, and I get that. I really do. But there comes a point, like you said, where people are going to, either rebel against that tax or they're just simply not going to be able to pay it. And then it costs everybody in that instance. So
I think something I wanted to, it's been a great conversation, Billy, and I wanted to point out I had saw something online today, and I wanted to talk to you about this before we even got into that. But I saw something online today. You guys, what's going on in your world, Billy?
Well, it's a great day, and so I know what you're referring to. We chatted a little bit earlier about that, but I like to tell our thousands of listeners that we have out there tonight,
The millions at home and the
watching
thousands
around
of attendance.
watching around the country, and folks, this goes international, so we're out there on all the platforms that you get your favorite podcast from. But I've been in county government work for 33 and a half years, volunteered for the county 10 years prior to that, lifelong resident of Franklin County, and still want to be involved in my county. If there's a true person that has Franklin County mud running through their veins, it's me. So I'll be a candidate for Board of Supervisors at the fall election on November 4th for the Rocky Mountain District. So I'm currently collecting signatures. I'm about halfway there to get my name on the ballot. So if you see me knocking on your door or calling up or Facebook post, or I'm also going to get in the world of TikTok and Snapchat here before long, of putting some announcements out there. But I have decided to run for the Rocky Mountain District seat of the Franklin County Board of Supervisors, and I hope you can vote for me. And I'd like to talk to you. If you have any questions, give me a call or an email. And I think that one of my big stances is going to be accountability. As a matter of fact, that's going to be my tagline in my campaign: is a vote for me is a vote for accountability. Because I think there's lots of stuff out there that is not held to a lot of accountable standards that our private businesses are held to. I think there's other important things. I think economic development is really important. I'll never forget a gentleman here in town told me many years ago that I was talking to him, and he was talking to his father about what he wanted to do when he grew up, and his father said, "Well, son, what are you going to be?" And the gentleman was going to school, and he said, "Well, I'm going to school. I'm going to be an insurance agent." And he said, "Son, what we need is more smokestacks. We don't need insurance agents." And it took me a while to get what he was meaning with that. But if you don't have the worker there that's providing, manufacturing, or producing some good, the service industry is not going to survive. And I think that we've saw that going all the way back to NAFTA in Franklin County, where that we are slowly in Franklin County becoming a service and tourism uh, based economy, and I think we need to get back. Don't stop looking at that. But we need to get back to getting some more smokestacks, getting some more jobs in here, and I think that we're missing the boat instead of going for the Toyotas and the Amazons and the data centers. Let's go for the mom and pop operations that come in. I'd rather have 50 businesses that have 10 employees each than to have one that have 500 employees, because you know what happens when you put all your eggs in one basket. So economic development is going to be a big push of mine. Along with I'm a big supporter of the CTE building. I'm not so sure I support where the county wants to go with that right now. I think that I have some ideas that I'd like to pitch out. And then, of course, the last one would be public safety. But that's my four big platform items there. But I hope you can see to give me a chance to bring some fresh eyes to the board. And I have nothing negative to say about my opponent. I think he's a great gentleman. I consider him a friend. But it's something that I've always wanted to do. And Jeff can say that everything I do, I give 110%. And I couldn't do it when I was working full time. And now I'm in a position that I think I can do it. And I hope you can support me that. And Jeff, I thank you for giving me the opportunity to let everybody know there. So
Yeah, man, I was excited because that's a big deal, and I knew we were set to record tonight when I saw it. And folks, I had told Billy I was going to pause for a little bit, and you're going to hear some cool stuff that I'm working on. We're still going to be here every other Thursday. We're just I'm working on a little facelift in the background for my messaging and all those things. So and I was like, absolutely not, man. We're going to get out of here because listen, I had the opportunity for you to teach me what I hope that you're going to go, and I know you will, that you're going to go and teach everyone else and be that educator and the person that you like me. You can talk for hours about whatever in a room full of very few people, and that's a big deal. And I that's why I wanted to talk about some of those topics that have been going on and find your insight on those. And here's what I want to tell you, man. There's that buzz in I remember when I was a kid, we had Lane and we had Rodine. We was very heavily into textiles, and our 60% now I think of Franklin commutes out. And then our industry. I remember my mom when those factories, she had to go and I had uncles or whatever that their factories closed up and they had to go seek outside work there. And there was a lady I'd seen on Twitter or something, and she was talking about that impact of um, her small town, and I grew up there. Right? I know exactly what that looks like for, and in my world too, Billy, is we took away our manufacturing, it took away some hope. And then our manufacturing was replaced with synthetic opioids in our area, and our community, alongside a lot of the rest of Appalachia was affected through Kentucky and Southwest Virginia and down into Tennessee we dealt with a pretty wicked opioid crisis during my time in law enforcement, and it still exists to this day. And when I started hearing about the return to manufacturing and this, and it doesn't look like this, and like and knowing our community and where I grew up at, and even Roanoke, and there are other places like the railroad. We're Labor Town. Railroad exited to Atlanta, um, and versus here. So just thinking about that from a thing, man, I got excited about it. Like I was, because I worked at a dealership, had a manufacturer that we supported and they supported us. So I'm deeply rooted into that blue collar type of work that you mentioned, and our community was built on that. And politics aside, I think anytime that we can impact our hometown and our community and get back to putting the people, giving the people hope and that they have something and that they can make a living, they can grow their family, all those things that is important for just good mental health and good stability in your life. The return of that is a big deal, I think.
oh, absolutely, and I think that that my county especially really in the last 5 to 10 years, has become stagnant. I couldn't tell you the last industry that came to Franklin County. I think it was McCarroll AIDS, and that was over 10 years ago that came. And so, what are we doing? Or let me rephrase that. What are other counties doing that we're not doing? I go to Richmond a lot, uh, and you can go down 460 or 29, up to Charlottesville and down, and just about every county you go through, there's cranes. You see cranes. There's houses. There's subdivisions. There's factories going up. But you don't see that in Franklin County right now. And I can remember back in the late 90s, early 2000s, there was an article that actually hung in the Franklin County Courthouse when the boardroom was up there, and that the Roanoke Times had done, where Franklin County was the fastest growing county west of Charlottesville. The population rate was something like 18% a year. And all these new manufacturers was coming in. Well, that's not happening anymore. Franklin County has actually lost some population in the last couple of years. And I think that has to do with some of the stagnant ideas. I think not saying people are not working hard trying to do that, because I know that's a very competitive thing to do, is to bring people in. But now we have natural gas. We never had natural gas before.
Big deal in manufacturing. I know sometimes people brush over that. It's another one of those education things. Like for the folks, that's a big deal in manufacturing. Just the proximity of it. Yeah.
Absolutely. But I think that so you would hear really the last 5-6 years, well, we lose out on this because we don't have natural gas. Well, now we've got natural gas, so let's get to building something. And I think that that's where I may be able to bring something to the table. It's just I'm not smarter than people that's there now. I'm probably not as smart, but I'm a new set of eyes that can come on with maybe some new ideas that hasn't been thought of, and maybe some out of the box stuff. So I'm excited. I hope I get the chance to do that, and we can do our best for 4 years.
It's absolutely full of some of the best folks. The government, like that's not nobody's throwing rocks at nobody, man. Billy's coming along to be a solution to his side of it. Absolutely excited for where that takes you, and I'm glad you took time to educate me. That's where I spend a lot of my time, is asking, like, why do we, what's this? Why don't we do this? Explain this. And there's sometimes I get like, oh, there's a big reason, Jeff. This is why. I'm like, oh, well, I didn't know that. And other times it's a very educational opportunity, like you gave me tonight. And so folks, this is one of those things where it's a great time. There's a lot of buzz going on. Don't be afraid to ask these questions and educate yourself. And don't know. I read feeds sometimes. I'm banned myself from social media, so if you don't see any posts coming up, it's not. I just kind of I was starting to scroll more than I was creating, and I said I recognized it, and I'm like, all right, so I'm kind of in 2 weeks jail, Billy, while I'm working on my rebrand. And that was all by kind of cause, was to be able to get me and get my head cleared, and less scrolling and less all the other stuff. But I hope folks will reach out for you and take advantage and just learn more from you, and the issues or whatever, and just know how their government works. And I think that's a big deal for all of us, is whether it be a meals tax debate or whatever. I think it's okay for us as citizens to be informed and know what's going on, and just have an idea. I'm a little closer to the business world than some folks, and I get that, but I enjoy us being able to use our hour every other Thursday to sit down here. And I think this is another one of those episodes, Billy, to where there's just a lot of educational value. And I think that's what we said. We just want it, ain't throwing rocks at no one. We're just trying to provide opinions and educate everybody on kind of the way it works in those scenarios, man. So I'm excited, dude. That's about you. Listen, I'm gonna tell you something. I had a lot of firsts on this podcast, for the Second Chance podcast, a lot of firsts on the Second Chance podcast, Billy, but I've never had an official election announcement until tonight.
So, all right. Well, and Jeff, I want to give you kudos to. I was out a couple days ago, um, and I was at a house, and I was asking the gentleman there to sign my petition, and he signed it and everything, and we got to talking about how we would do the campaign and signs and bumper stickers and shirts like that. And he says, "Well, you already have the game." He says, "I watch you on a podcast." I said, "Well, that's
That's awesome.
Jeff's podcast. I'm just a guest." But he was watching us, and for the people that don't know, we're on with the Second Chance podcast is on multiple platforms. It's on LinkedIn, it's on Twitter, it's on Facebook, it's on Apple, iTunes, Spotify, and me and Jeff are doing this live. I'm sitting tonight in my upstairs office in Rocky Mount, Virginia, at 8:16 p.m. This is not, it's being recorded that you can see later, but it's not like we did this 2 weeks ago. And I would encourage you that we're able to talk back and forth through text with you. So if I will tell Jeff, and I hope he doesn't get mad at me, as we continue to do these, I would like to talk about some of the ideas with the election and what I will try to do for the county if I'm fortunate enough to get to be elected. So I'd like to have some dialogue with the citizenry of what's your ideas, what do you think, and what would you like to see change in the county? And it's as simple as typing on your keyboard, and it pops up on Jeff's screen there, and we can talk back and forth. So take advantage of that. And
Q&A, yeah, like submit your questions, right? And submit your questions. I'd love that. I'd love to have more interaction for folks that are like me that go, all right, Jeff, well, ask Billy why this is the way this is, and just don't on those things, those topics, like of why things move like they are, and why do certain things happen, and then hey, it's an opportunity. I don't think we ever want to turn anything into a gripe session and sit around. We always want to make sure that we're working toward the end goal and putting people first and all the cool stuff that we do. So just keep that in mind. This is not we want to make sure that we understand you're going to be frustrated over X, Y, or Z and how it affected you in different ways. I get frustrated in different ways, but definitely bring your questions and why something may work, or if you have, hey, why don't I think we should do this, and like we talked our last episode, Billy, was we talked on the government's role in incubating small business, right? So I think this is a great episode to build off of that. So another good one in the books, man. I tell you, by our nature, I said, Billy, hey man, let's do about 30 minutes tonight so I can. So we can wrap up, and you were like, yeah, that's all we're gonna do, and here we are, an hour and a half into the conversation, just dropping pure value from you, man. So I appreciate you.
I don't think
Hey,
we
Billy, you forgot, man. I forgot. I teed you up wrong. Billy, you need to tell people how they can get in touch with you.
All
And we didn't
right,
even
yeah.
talk about Ferguson Safety Solutions and all
Ferguson
the.
Safety Solution,
You got, man.
leadership and lessons learned. That's my business. We're doing well. I think since we talked the last time, I mentioned a potential speaking engagement up in Hebron, Kentucky, and unfortunately for me, we didn't get selected for that, but have been encouraged to apply
Hey,
for some
man.
more.
Fortunately, that freed you up to do something better that day.
I like the optimistic outlook on that, and it did come through because now I've been contacted by some hospitals out in Richmond, Virginia, not the ones that I did a while back. This is 2 additional hospitals to come out and do a 40-hour program for them. I was also contacted by a adjoining locality to come in and do some work for them. I don't want to say where that's at right now, but I've had 2 other contract opportunities that came up in the last week. So we're working with them on how we can give them a great product. But W Ferguson 62 at gmail.com, or Jeff's favorite, William.Ferguson at fergusonsafetysolutions.com. That's the way you can get in contact with me, or you can just email or text Jeff. He can get in contact with me. We talk several times a week, but if you want to talk safety solutions or Franklin County issues with my candidacy, feel free to reach out to me. I'll check my email many times a day, wferguson62 at gmail.com. Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, man. All right, Billy. Appreciate you being here, brother.
All right, until we see it again. Thank you.